Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with ACCT and the Office of Adult and Career Technical Education at the U.S. Department of Education, Innovative Approaches to Expand Non-Credit Learning. We will be starting in just a moment. Thank you. Welcome to today's webinar, Innovative Approaches to Expand Non-Credit Learning. My name is Carrie Warwick Smith, and I'm Vice President for Public Policy here at the Association of Community College Trustees. Today, we are thrilled to host our partners at the Office of Adult and Career Technical Education at the U.S. Department of Education, as well as several of our member colleges who are all working together to demonstrate how we can expand non-credit learning on our community college campuses. Today, our featured speaker will be Luke Ryan, who is Acting Assistant Secretary for sorry, just having a bit of a technical issue there. We're thrilled to have Luke with us today. I'm going to introduce him in just a minute, but I was reminded that I forgot to make our administrative announcements. So we are going to have our featured speaker, Acting Assistant Secretary Luke Ryan for the Office of Career and Technical and Adult Education, followed by our panel of colleges, which will be moderated by my colleague Steve Jurch, who is Associate Vice President for the Center for Policy and Practice here at ACCT. And then we will be doing a group discussion at the end. So I do encourage you to stay on for the entirety of the hour to hear both portions of the presentation as well as the discussion. You are welcome to enter questions into the question box, into the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and then we will curate those and come back to those at the end. So with that, let me turn it over to Luke, who has been with the U.S. Department of Education for about 2 years, currently is serving as Acting Assistant Secretary, was prior to that working in the office alongside his predecessor, Amy Lloyd, who was Assistant Secretary for the Office of Octay, and came to the department with great experience in workforce development and career technical education in both Delaware and Maryland. Luke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Carrie. Can everybody hear me? Just double checking. All right. So first and foremost, Carrie, thank you for your leadership. And Steve, also thank you for your leadership in hosting today's webinar. We're very appreciative of ACCT for hosting today's conversation and also having the opportunity to talk about non-credit education. Specifically, I'm really excited to talk about how federal Perkins funds can be used to support non-credit and credit programs in our nation's community and technical college systems. To the folks on today's call, so thank you for taking time out of what I know are very busy days. And good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone to you. But I am also appreciative of your leadership in helping to bridge academic and workforce program across your communities and across your institutions. So thank you for your leadership and thank you for the opportunity to engage today in a learning discussion. In terms of my remarks, I'm going to go through just a couple quick things. So the first is I'll talk a little bit about the federal Perkins program, how it's situated within states and students that it serves, as well as its purpose and a couple other different things that are important both for policy context and opportunities in which institutions and state eligible agencies can work together. The second thing I'll talk about is how specifically state agencies and eligible institutions can work to develop policies that support non-credit education programs and ways in which I've seen post-secondary institutions use Perkins funds to transition non-credit students into degree granting programs as well. I'll also talk a little bit about ways that I've seen institutions of higher education invest their Perkins funds in both non-credit and degree granting programs that are responsive to local, regional, and state economies. All right, so to start, a little bit about Perkins. So Perkins 5 was constituted in 2018. States developed a new state plan in 2020. The Act itself serves both secondary and post-secondary students and is designed to prepare students with academic and technical skills to help facilitate increasing education as well as entrance into the workforce. The program itself is about $1.4 billion that's administered federally through our office, the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education. Those dollars are primarily formula driven to states. So essentially, these are existing dollars that are administered federally to states, and then states distribute those funds to both secondary and post-secondary institutions that implement CTE programs in their respective jurisdictions. In total, the Act supports about 8 million secondary learners, and it supports about 3.3 million post-secondary learners. And what's important in terms of the context, just for today, is each state is also required in its administration of Perkins to designate what is referred to as an eligible state agency. So this is essentially the state agency that's responsible for program administration, that's responsible for the development of each state's Perkins state plan, and oversees both the accountability provisions as well as the implementation of these federal resources. Typically, eligible state agencies are state departments of education. They can also be state workforce boards, as well as state community college systems. And as I mentioned, states are required to develop a state plan. About 2/3 of states right now developed their plan in 2020 that carried through 2024. And these states, but again, about 2/3, are working through a process of annual updates. So that means again, 2/3 of states across the country are working through a process annually where they're updating their state determined performance levels, and they're developing amendments to their Perkins state plans as they need to in terms of the ongoing implementation needs of the program in states. There are 17 states that actually developed new state plans in 2024, which are 4-year state plans that will then carry those states through 2028. So again, 2/3 of states working on an annual process, about 17 states across the country having recently submitted and having approved new 4-year plans. But what's important about these state plans is that this is an opportunity for states and institutions of higher education to really develop policies that can support education to employment continuum. And it's an opportunity for states, again, working with the stakeholders that are required under the Act, to really think about how non-credit education is positioned across the broader, secondary, post-secondary, and workforce systems. And through the development of Perkins state plans, states and institutions can really establish policies that help to direct federal funds to support non-credit as well as credit granting degree programs. So there are 3 places then that I would encourage you to think about in terms of kind of your review of your state's Perkins plan. The first is within the Perkins state plan, there is a section that specifically refers to the vision. So each state must create a vision and a set of goals that articulates how education and training systems will respond to economic, social, and labor market needs. And the state can use this to codify things like credential and degree attainment goals, increase graduation and completion rates, or improve the job quality and economic outcomes of a diverse set of learners. And through that state's vision, it is a way in which states can articulate how they position non-credit education within the larger design of their education and workforce system. The second area that I'd highlight and encourage you to take a look at is really how your state defines a CTE program. So states have the option to define CTE programs that include a broad set of programs or a narrow set of programs. So specifically, states can essentially define a CTE program or a program of study as including things like non-credit education, as well as credit-bearing degree programs, credential and degree programs. States also have the option of including within its definition of CTE things like registered apprenticeship. So again, a state can determine kind of its scope of CTE programming within its Perkins state plan. Within its Perkins state plan, states also have the opportunity to develop definitions of what is referred to as size, scope, and quality. So the terms size, scope, and quality within the Act are used as kind of an administrative tool to approve CTE programs for funding that's issued under the Act. And things like non-credit programs can be included in the state's definition of scope, as one example. As another example, the connection between non-credit and credit bearing credential and degree programs can be something that the state discusses in its definition of quality. So there are a number of kind of avenues within the definition of a CTE program and how the state approves CTE programs that can be used to reinforce non-credit education. And again, its linkages with higher levels of education and facilitation of entrance into the workforce. The third thing that I would talk about is how dollars, formula funds, are essentially administered under the Perkins Act. For within the statute, post-secondary Perkins funds are largely distributed based upon the percentage of students that receive Pell Grants and as well as recipients of assistance from the Bureau of Indian Affairs enrolled in CTE programs at such institutions. So essentially, an institution receives a proportion based on its percentage of Pell or BIA funded scholarships. But states have within the statute the ability to develop what is referred to as an alternate post-secondary formula that represents a more equitable distribution of students who are disadvantaged within the state. So to date, there are 9 states that have created an alternative post-secondary funding formula. In each of those 9 states, those states include Pell, but they also include additional markers of poverty and student need, such as SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, other state or federal public benefit programs. And then several states have included parallel linkages between like census tracts and concentrations of poverty that exist through WIOA designations and different things along those lines. And again, this is a way in which states can think about the breadth of programming that it's seeking to fund under the Perkins Act and ensure that all students are represented in that funding formula. Specifically, in this instance, if the state wanted to include non-credit students in non-credit programs as eligible for Perkins funds, the state could develop an alternative post-secondary formula that uses markers of poverty and student need that are more apparent in non-credit programs where Pell may not be applicable. So this is, again, is another way in which states can structure the financial formula of Perkins to represent really the work that institutions are leading across both their non-credit and their credit bearing programs, and make sure that all students essentially are counted in that population and in that funding formula. So I would encourage you to look at how your state allocates its post-secondary funding formula. Again, 9 states have developed an alternative proposal. As Carrie mentioned, when I worked at the state, we developed an alternative post-secondary formula. It was not that hard in terms of working with the department. It's really just representing the populations that exist across programs and the markers of economic need that the state is able to track and produce. And it's making sure that the formula for distribution of those resources is more equitable than what is outlined within the statute, within the Act itself. So that, I think, is an exciting opportunity to think about how financial incentives can also be established alongside programmatic incentives within the implementation of the Perkins statute. The last thing I talk about with funding within Perkins is I would also look at how your state has either developed or could possibly develop what is referred to as a reserve fund. So the reserve fund, essentially states are allowed to reserve up to 15% of Perkins funds that are distributed then through formula to do targeted programming and targeted assistance. There are a number of states that take advantage of that full 15, and then there are a range of states that do things like a 10% allocation or a 5% allocation. And I think there are about 14 states that actually do not implement a reserve fund. But this essentially allows for targeted investments from the state eligible agency to institutions directly. So as an example, when I worked in the state of Delaware, we essentially issued competitive grants to our state's community college system to improve its data infrastructure, connecting non-credit and credit-bearing programs. And that was everything from enrollment management to student support services, and then making sure that there were transition services that were also made available to students as they worked across workforce to academic programming. Right. So this is a way in which the state can essentially use its reserve fund to provide targeted supports to institutions to improve data infrastructure, to improve program coordination, to develop curriculum, or to really ensure that the environment around credit and non-credit programs is conducive to forward-thinking policy. The other things, just in terms of institutional practice that I've seen, there are kind of just 3 or 4 things that I want to point out. So the first is when I talk with institutions, I encourage them to think holistically about how they apply federal funds. So specifically in industries like healthcare or manufacturing or transportation and logistics, there are many industries where the type of classroom space, the type of equipment, the type of faculty training that's needed, that Perkins funds can be used to support, it does cut across both workforce and academic programs. And essentially, those dollars can be leveraged across 2 sides of the institution to benefit multiple populations of students and to make sure that equipment, that training, that resource, that coordination, right, those federal dollars are leveraged towards a greater end. One example, again, when I worked in the state of Delaware, and Delaware Technical Community College, flagship institution, essentially used its Perkins funds to invest in regional centers of excellence. And those regional centers of excellence were in manufacturing, they were in healthcare, they were in information technology, they were in transportation and logistics, all kind of bedrocks of the state's economy. And essentially within those regional centers of excellence, they developed, responsive workforce programming to employers and economic needs. And they implemented aligned academic degree programs that essentially built off that workforce foundation and allowed students to earn a credential, matriculate into the workforce, and continue their education within a 2-year or a 4-year degree program. And they essentially leveraged their Perkins funds to help create that foundation, to create that curricular infrastructure, and to invest in their faculty in order to deliver those services to communities. And what I loved about what Deltec did is they made those investments strategically in communities where they did not have large campuses. So essentially, alongside their large campus infrastructure, they invested within communities, alongside employers and workforce centers, alongside K-12 institutions, so that programming is more accessible, particularly in like high growth industries. So I would encourage folks to think strategically about their investments and use of federal funds to forward multiple goals across that institution's perspective. The other things that I would encourage institutions to think about is really, policies that the institution develops around things like credit for prior learning and prior learning assessments or evaluations, right? Federal funds can absolutely be used to support institutional policy and create structured bridges across non-credit and credit-bearing programs, as well as invest in data infrastructure, enrollment management, right? All types of things that are necessary to help support students to matriculate into higher levels of education, also and placement into employment. And there are a couple of good examples of this specifically that we highlight in a recent blog, and I know that our panel will highlight in a little bit later. The second piece is I would encourage institutions to think about their institutional research, their data teams, and their operations, and to think about what types of services are available to academic students as well as workforce students, and to ensure that there's reciprocity and that there are opportunities to receive academic supports or coaching or student support services or access to a library, right, across both credit and non-credit programs, so that students are, again, supported academically to pursue, right, that credential as well as that degree. And then the third thing, I'd really encourage institutions to think about is as they work through the process of developing educational programs, whether it's for the purposes of WIOA or whether it's for the purposes of Perkins or for the purposes of 2-year or 4-year degree approval, right? This is an opportunity to apply federal funds specifically to think about how programming can stack across the whole of that institution, so that essentially stackable credentials and connected degree models are kind of first and foremost in the development of academic programming, and that once developed are essentially implemented within and across institutions and student opportunities that exist. So real quick, there are three things that I encourage you to look at. The first, I would encourage you within your Perkins State Plan to look at how your state defines a CTE program. And I would encourage you to see if, non-credit apprenticeship as well as credit-bearing credential and degree programs are included in that definition. The second thing is I would encourage you to look at how your state allocates its post-secondary funding formula. And if there is a more equitable way to distribute those funds based upon the types of programming that exist and is desired to be funded, right, I would encourage you to think about an alternative post-secondary funding formula. And then the third thing, from an institution specifically, I would encourage you to look at how you apply federal Perkins funds and to see if those things and those investments can be made strategically across your credit and non-credit programs, and to also develop the infrastructure that's necessary to support students in terms of their credential or degree attainment, but also to matriculate and transition into higher levels of education in the workforce. So with that, what I want to say is, I'm really excited about the work I've seen across the country in higher education, in the responsiveness to economies and the responsiveness to employers. And I think community colleges are, for lack of a more hip term, they are the bee's knees in terms of bridging community and workforce needs. And I think the work that you lead across the country is absolutely what is needed for students to reach their economic potential and for our country to make good on its promise to its citizens. And I encourage you to continue to work in this space, because I do think, non-credit to credit programming is absolutely what we should be thinking about in terms of how we shape higher education and how we make sure higher education is responsive to both students' needs and employers' needs. And I'm excited about this work. I'm excited about ACCT's leadership, and I'm excited to turn it back over to Carrie, who I think is going to transition to our panel. So with that, just thank you. I know we'll have questions at the end, but again, I'm excited, so I appreciate the opportunity. Carrie, back to you.
Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you for taking so much time with us today and for staying on to the discussion and for sharing that great information and those great examples from around the country. We here at ACCT are also very excited about everything that community colleges have to offer and the way they're being innovative and cutting edge to help serve our workforce and adult learners. And I am thrilled to be able to turn over this session to my colleague, Steve Jurch, who, as I mentioned before, leads our Center for Policy and Practice and has worked with worked with many campuses throughout his projects, but specifically with the three community college leaders joining him on the panel today. He will introduce them and lead the discussion, and then we'll move into Q&A. Steve.
Thank you, Carrie. And thanks, Luke, so much. That was great information. And I know that Perkins is an often overlooked funding stream. We've had some initial questions come in around funding. And so I think Perkins is one of those funding streams that automatically gets associated with credit programs. And so, pointing out that the importance in thinking about non-credit and using Perkins is very important. So I'm excited to get to this next part of our webinar and discuss some great information with our amazing panelists. And I want to take a second just to introduce them before we get into the questions. And so with us today, we have Dr. Lisa Scari. She is currently the president at Mount Hood Community College in Oregon and has been in that position since 2018. She's been involved in community colleges for 32 years, ranging from the classroom through various administrative positions. She's very active in higher education initiatives in the state and serves as the chair of the Oregon's President's Council. Also, we have Shelley Reinhardt. She serves as the assistant vice chancellor, instructional support program efficacy at San Jacinto College in Texas, and was actually a participant in one of our non-credit to credit projects that we had last year, and has been at the college for 23 years. She provides executive leadership across the college to align and streamline programs, funding, and connecting students to resources and employers. And finally, we have Mina Wu. She serves as the Vice President of Workforce, Innovation, and Strategic Partnerships at Howard Community College in Maryland. In this role, she works closely with businesses and industry partners to foster partnership, provide workforce talent development and training solutions. Mina also oversees the community educational programs, which includes the WIOA-funded GED and English as a Second Language programs, as well as adults with special needs and youth programs. So thank you all so much for being here. And I know we've had conversations in the past, and you bring such a wide variety of experiences with non-credit learning. So I'm really excited to get into this discussion. Mina, if we could start with you, and Jose, you can stop sharing. Howard Community College has really been at the forefront of apprenticeship development in Maryland. And I think most of us on this call are familiar with the traditional apprenticeship programs through various unions or other sponsorship organizations, but you really have expanded those occupations into what sort of phrases non-traditional areas. And these non-traditional areas often lie in the non-credit space. So can you speak a little bit about why you chose non-credit programs when you're working with these programs, and maybe a little bit about how it works?
Yes, thank you, Steve. And thank you, ACCT, for having this important conversation on this topic. So Howard Community College is located in Columbia, Maryland, and we serve about 22,000 students each year in our both credit and non-credit programs. And we're proud to say we are the largest registered apprenticeship sponsor for community colleges in Maryland. And I'm very proud to say that today, this morning at our council meeting, we got our newest apprenticeship approved for accounting specialists. So that is an example of our non-traditional apprenticeship that we are the sponsor of. One of the things we love about apprenticeship is that the funding comes from the employers. So we don't have to worry about how do we get this funding through so that we can provide this opportunity for our students. But we also believe in the registered apprenticeship model because it is a win-win. It's a win for our students, and it's a win for our employers. So we believe that Earn While You Learn model provides the opportunity that our students need. Many of our students in community colleges are only able to go to a school for a short time so that they have to get into the workforce. And they are often going part-time because they have to balance their workload as well as their family obligations and everything like that. And this opportunity to remove that barrier and provide that access is narrowing the opportunity gap that many of our students face. Also, our employers also win because they're growing their own talent and they're able to cultivate their own workforce who are very loyal, and national statistics show that these employees stay with the company that invested in them. And our companies feel good about doing the social good by providing this access to career opportunities who may not have otherwise had opportunity to do it. So our college has 12 programs with 16 occupations in such areas as education, business, healthcare, and IT, and so on. And many of our programs are actually credit programs where our students are earning credits as well as certificates and some full associate's degrees. However, the whole registered apprenticeship program is managed from our workforce area. So the non-credit area is the one who manages this whole registered apprenticeship program for the college. And one of the reasons for doing that is because we, oftentimes the non-credit area, are the most agile and innovative areas of the college. We are always in the community. We are engaged with businesses. We have those relationships with the employers. And most importantly, we speak the language of education. So when employers don't really understand how to work the landscape, we are able to liaise between the college and the employer to make this model work. So we have a great relationship with our credit programs and our faculty to be able to bring like cybersecurity, LPN, and those types of programs through the registered apprenticeship model to our community. But we also have a lot of non-credit registered apprenticeship programs. And oftentimes I get the question, how do you know? How do you make the decision whether this program should be in the credit area or the non-credit area? And we basically have 3 rules of thumb. So first, we look at the employer. Registered apprenticeships are employer-led, so we have that conversation. We say, what is it that our employers are looking for? Are they looking for X, Y, and Z? And sometimes, employers get lazy and they're like, oh, we just want a degree. And we have to really talk to them about what are the skills and competencies that you need, and is that the best way? So we have that conversation. The second thing we look at is the earning potential of the occupation. We are not going to say if they're making a little bit more than the minimum wage, then we're not going to say, do 60 credits and get a full associate's degrees before you can start earning that income. We're going to say, you know what, if we have both credit and non-credit way of doing it, maybe getting it through the non-credit, get into the workforce, start earning your income, and then continue on to getting your degree may be a better way through stackable credentials and prior learning credits. So that's the second thing we look at. And the third thing we look at is a career pathway. Is there a career pathway for this occupation that makes sense for that person to earn an associate's degree so that they can stack that to a higher degree or for career advancement? So one of the examples that I can provide today is our surgical technologist program. So our registered apprentice program in surgical technologist came out because several employers came to us and the hospital said we have a need for the surg techs in our area. And there are two ways to do it. You could do a full associate's degree as well as a non-credit way of earning that licensure. The difference was that our non-credit program allows you to complete in 13 months instead of 2 years of full-time study. So that was one thing. The second thing we looked at was while the earning was not too bad, the career pathway really didn't exist in that certain occupation. Once you're a search tech, you may be able to move up as like a manager or lead, but there really wasn't another occupation that was stacked onto it. Most times they would go to some place near or around that occupation to do that advancement. So we felt that a full associate's degree was not needed for that occupation, and we created that program as a non-credit registered apprenticeship. So I think that community colleges are in the perfect place to be able to utilize this model that worked so well for centuries for traditional occupations to provide this access to opportunity for our students in the non-credit area.
Thanks so much. That was really some interesting information about how it's not just a plug and play. It's sort of working with the employers to understand what their needs are and then figuring out the best solution for that. Your responsibility lies in workforce, so non-credit. And one of the demographics of student that can significantly contribute to the workforce are those with special needs. And, often trying to find opportunities for them for education and the job market, they don't often have access to the programs that can help them develop those skills. And that's where non-credit programs can really be beneficial and fill those gaps for these students. Can you talk a little bit about what Howard is doing for these students?
Yes. So we are we're starting a program that is a workforce development program for adults with special needs and different abilities. And I'm very proud of this program because this is one area that we really wanted to develop more. And as we look at the workforce and the shortages that we see in so many different occupations, we can't just rely on the traditional folks coming up to the pipeline. We have to look at those untapped resources. And I strongly believe that adults with different abilities, as well as immigrant population, are the two demographics that we can really leverage in order to fill the workforce needs that our employers have. So we have a certified logistics program that we have for our adults with special needs, and our students are getting the logistics associate and technician certificates to be able to enter into the workforce. And we were able to accomplish this through a lot of braiding of funds. So we braided funds from the state, the local, the WIOA, and all of that, as well as our grants office, who went out and got grants for us so that we are able to apply and provide these resources for our students. Another thing is when we talk about braiding funds, we oftentimes just think about financial funds, but what this program allows us to do is we are braiding resources. So for example, our students who need career preparation, job coaching, job shadowing, and in those externship places, we're able to work with the ARC of Howard County, DOORS, Autism Society of Maryland, as well as our disability services to be able to provide these wraparound support so that our students are able to be successful. And we also are working with employers who are providing externship locations so that our students are able to not only get the hands-on in the skills lab, but also get that real work experience at the employer sites. A couple recommendations I would like to share with the group is that as non-credit, a lot of times we are on our own, we're self-sufficient, we do a lot of great work. But I think if you reach out to friends across campus and across the community, you'll see that a lot of them will come with funding and resources. Two of my best friends at the college are my foundation person and our grant person. And our foundation person goes out and really actively advocates for our students and our programs, as well as our grant person who finds opportunities where if a credit program is going after a certain population or a certain program, says, hey, have you considered doing an institutional application and bringing both credit and non-credit in? And this certified logistics program came out because of all those partners being willing to play together and say, we want to serve this community.
That is really neat. I was at a college in Maryland as well before joining ACCT, and we had some programs for adults with disabilities, and it really does change. We know we change lives every day, but this really is quite an impactful program. So thank you for sharing. Lisa, if I could turn to you next, and I know it may be beneficial to the audience also if you can talk a little bit about Mount Hood in general as we answer these questions to help frame this discussion. But Mina spoke about how Howard is leveraging non-credit programs for apprenticeship programs. Mount Hood is also utilizing non-credit programs, but in the apprenticeship space, but in a bit of a different way. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how Mount Hood approaches non-credit in apprenticeship.
I'd be happy to. So based on the community that Mount Hood serves, expanding the non-credit workforce has been critical to fulfilling our mission. A little bit about who we are. Mount Hood Community College is the 4th largest community college in Oregon, and we enroll about 18,000 to 19,000 students annually. We also are one of the more diverse colleges. About 43% of our students are students of color, and 26% of those are Hispanic. We serve one of the most financially fragile districts in the state. Roughly in our district, a third of individuals earn less than $50,000, should say households earn less than $50,000. 40% of our community has a high school diploma or less, and 27% of our residents speak a language other than English. Our students, we have 2/3 or 67% experience basic needs insecurity, with about 40% that are food insecure, 60% that are housing insecure, and 20% of our students who are homeless. So as such, the college really looks to see how we can respond to the needs of our community and build off our strengths, which include a really strong and progressive adult basic education, English as a second language, kind of getting started programming. And then also intentional credentials that scaffold into further education. So we see this opportunity to take the non-credit work that can build into credit work down the line. So back to your question. Mount Hood Community College works with about 20 different trade unions in our area and enrolls 6,000 apprentices annually. And to assist with this apprenticeship pipeline, we've been delving into the non-credit preparatory class or pre-apprenticeship space. We have some partners like the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers who have both refer and fund students to participate in these pre-apprenticeship programs. But we also offer it to the general public, which allows them to kind of self-fund their enrollment to kind of ease their way into or prepare them for registered apprenticeship programs. One of my favorite programs build off our strengths in vocational ESL. And that's been a pre-apprenticeship program in the construction trades. We call it CPEL, which is Construction Pre-Apprentice for English Language Learners. And it's a non-credit grant-funded program that is making it free for students to participate. The program is designed to respond to industry employment needs and their wishes to really diversify the industry. It was developed in partnership with our regional union registered apprenticeship training centers. And the program is based on that integrated education and training model, which I will note is part of our state Perkins plan. So fortunately in there. And it also then scaffolds into our current technical ed credit programs. So specifically in it, the students learn construction theory and gain hands-on skills. They receive contextualized English language and math skills, employment preparation, and job search assistance. After completing the program, the students have the knowledge and skills to successfully articulate into a registered apprenticeship program. This is a 10-week program and it's full-time, and we've seen a 92% completion rate across the 3 cohorts we've had. In addition to the training, we are also offering wraparound support, including a dedicated career coach who works with the students from the entry through the program and then afterwards as they transition into a registered apprenticeship or work. And we've been able to also provide additional supports like rent, gas, utilities, and more. The success to this has really been in our partners. And so in addition to working with the regional pre-apprenticeship programs, we also work with our local employment office, our high schools, and numerous community-based organizations. And the nice thing is we're seeing this model is gaining recognition and interest in kind of the employer and training community. So we're starting conversations to see where we might be able to scale up this concept with other areas, other employers, which will ultimately diversify and meet their labor needs.
Yeah, no, that is, it's nice to see all these examples of just sort of the diversity and flexibility that non-credit learning can provide. And, so we've heard about apprenticeship programs, we've heard about, individuals with special needs, we've heard, programmatic, but there's also sort of a purpose that the non-credit learning can fill, and that's around professional development. We know that a lot of professions require these things to remain certified or have the opportunity to advance in careers. And non-credit programming is a great solution for that. So we're not talking about a full-blown program. We're just talking about, specific courses or training that can help someone get from point A to point B in their occupation. And so, one area that's in the news and has been for several years where there's a critical workforce need is childcare. So can you talk a little bit about how Oregon early childhood education professionals obtain professional development and how Mount Hood supports this initiative?
Yeah. So one of the unique features about Mount Hood Community College is that we also operate the Multnomah County Head Start program. So for the last 50 years, we have been overseeing the program that's providing childcare to approximately 800 to 1,000 kids a year in 15 to 20 different sites. And this strength in childcare resulted in us also becoming the primary childcare provider support entity for Portland. And our specific program is called the Child Care Resource and Referral. And this organization provides a variety of professional development pathways that support the ongoing growth and retention of early childhood education professionals. So a little context in Oregon, individuals within the early childhood education field have 3 different pathways that they can move up on the Oregon registry. They can pursue the degree or certificate pathway. They can pursue the college course credit pathway. And then there's this non-credit community-based training pathway. And this is where our Child Care Resource and Referral really steps in to fill the need. They are primarily focused on how to provide that pathway and alternate learning method that stretches beyond those traditional class settings and really promotes accessibility for marginalized communities who have not historically had access. So for our part, we coordinate and deliver the training, provide consultation and technical assistance to early learning educators to support quality and inclusive childcare. And within the language diversity in our region, we're offering this professional development in various languages, including Vietnamese, Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Somali, and Russian, in addition to English. The other advantage is, in addition to the community-based trainings and this non-credit training, Childcare Resource and Referral also does job-embedded professional development, which includes coaching related to classroom instruction and environments, specific training around inclusion and leadership development, and then technical assistance for navigating the early childhood education system and licensing process here in our state. And we're beginning to delve more into the business development side of it, because as we know, childcare providers not only provide early childhood education, they also have a business to run. And so we're currently working with our Small Business Development Center to figure out how we can develop some non-credit additional professional development to offer business-related courses that will help provide our childcare providers successfully running their business. So I will also note that these services, because they are funded through the state, the county, and the city, are completely free to participants. So it's a cool program.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. No, these are some amazing examples. And I want to turn to Shelley now, because we've heard about specific programming. We've heard some different examples around funding and braiding and different things like that. But there's a bit of a different aspect of non-credit learning that we hear a lot about, and that is the pathway into credit-bearing programs. And Luke mentioned this earlier about non-credit to credit being important. And so we know that one of the ways that community colleges can enhance the utilization of non-credit learning is through these pathways into credit that can lead to certificates or degrees. Now, this is often easier said than done. I mentioned earlier we had a project around this that Shelley participated in with her institution. And then one thing we've heard is students are not aware or don't know how to navigate the transition. So Shelley, you and San Jacinto have implemented some resources and some creative staffing solutions to kind of help with this. Can you share a little bit about those?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Steve. And, the participation that we had in the non-credit and credit alignment lab that was with Education Strategy Group and sponsored by ACCT was very eye-opening. We had many conversations around a table where we had a lot of aha moments, a lot of heartbreaking moments. We did realize that our students really didn't understand how they could move from non-credit to credit. So 2 of our action items that came out of that was, 1, creating visuals for those stackable credentials and helping students understand the increased economic mobility. And, very specifically, our boxes are in green because we wanted to call attention to the money, because part of our goal is to increase the social and economic mobility in our community. And the student participants throughout this grant, there was a great video that was made by ESG that really had our students across the country saying, we just don't know how to move from one program to another. And so when we applied for the Title V grant back in 2022, we wrote in a position for at the time we called it non-credit to credit, but we've simplified that and basically said it's a health sciences bridge coordinator. And so this person works we realized our academic advising is very much geared towards our credit students and the credit programs. And then our, students in the non-credit programs, and if anyone can come up with a better name, we'd much rather not say non-credit, but realized that there was not an intentional segregation, but the advising was very different. And so this person kind of sits in between, and she has done some really great creative programming where she does go into the classrooms and we're targeting our health occupations because we felt like that was a natural bridge. And so she goes into the classroom, she talks to students, and she provides opportunities for them to get to know our credit programs and what it looks like, and then also helps them navigate through that transition. And we're currently looking at finding some opportunities. I mean, I agree, the foundation is one of my favorite friends, and our grants office, but we're looking for ways to incentivize students to move through a non-credit and credit pathway. And so that's where we're focused on right now. So between the stackable credential visuals that we're creating in our work with students, and then also the bridge coordinator, those are just two ways that we're really trying to help students understand how to navigate through those programs.
Yeah, no, I know that was a huge learning curve for all of us, but and you mentioned some aha moments around a table. If you had to identify one of the major challenges that, held back significant progress in this non-credit to credit, what would you say about that?
Having, my position is kind of an odd position, obviously by the title is usually my icebreaker. But when you say the two sides of the house, that's how we've operated for so long. And it's not that we're intentionally siloed. I think it's just the nature of the work that we do. And so I don't really sit in either area. I sit in between the areas. And so, my job really is to keep us focused on the work. So, I think we just get bogged down with what our quote unquote real job is, and making sure to provide those services. For me, I get to work in between both spaces. And I think also, if I had to say one other thing is, change is hard. And the pandemic presented this opportunity for us that we needed to accelerate and really meet the needs of folks in the community. Starting in a non-credit program is often less intimidating than starting in a credit program. And how do we move the students through? But this is hard work. And, we've been at it now. I've been in this role for 3.5 years. We've made some progress, but we've also know that we have different technologies, different applications. It's hard work. And so it takes time. And you just got to celebrate those wins and keep everybody around the table.
No, that is some words of advice. So thank you for that. And I think, with that, I just want to thank my panel or the panel again. We've heard some really great information around non-credit learning and examples for, programmatic, systemic, administrative, all kinds of different ways where, non-credit learning plays an important role. I don't want us to move. I know we're a little short on time, but I want to move into some questions. We did get a few prior. So, and also if you want to put into the Q&A function, we can get to as many as possible. But I want to turn this one is actually, I want to ask Luke, I want to bring Luke back into the discussion. And one of the core, and other people can chime in as well, but you talked about Perkins as being one funding stream. Do you have can you talk a little bit about different types of funding streams that non-credit can leverage, but then also what do you think the appetite is for more federal non-credit funding?
Yeah, so I mean, Pell is obviously one funding source. There are some limitations around the types of programs Pell can be used currently to fund in terms of non-credit, which I think most people on the call are very familiar with. Perkins is another. And then WIOA, particularly ETA Title I funds, as well as what Lisa described, ITA programming relative to Title II of WIOA as well. So I think, there are some choices there. The one thing based on Mina's work in terms of disability, supporting the disability community, one of the grants that the department issues every year is what's referred to as the Disability Innovation Fund. And essentially, this is unspent money from states relative to Title IV of WIOA. The last 3 years, the amount of money the department has awarded has been north of $250 million annually. The last 3 years, we had a specific education to employment focus. So like, the work that was described in Howard County is exactly the type of support that we're seeking to fund through the Disability Innovation Fund. I would also look at programs funded under FIPSE from the perspective of the department where there's opportunities there. So I'd keep an eye kind of on those. Steve, to your last question around workforce Pell or short-term Pell, I think there's great interest in short-term Pell. I can't tell you how many technical assistance documents I've written to the Hill specifically on a bunch of different bills, but I do think it will get done. The department obviously appreciates the work that our federal legislature is doing relative to this effort, and I'm excited to see at some point, and hopefully what is my very near term, some version of a workforce Pell issue or bill exist.
Thanks for that. No, I think that's helpful. And thank you for reading between the lines of my last question. The other thing is, and this was a question, and just to clarify for the audience, Perkins is a grant and does not need to be paid back, correct? It's like
Yeah, it's a federal formula fund. It's 1.4 billion. States are allocated a percentage of that. It's dollars that flow from the federal government directly to states. There's no return federally.
Perfect. Let me see what some other, does anyone else want to say anything about funding on the panel before I go to the next question?
I think it's just important for you to really braid that funding and finding ways to be creative and meeting the needs that the institution has and the student has.
The other thing is there are 34 states now that have some version of a tuition-free community college program. There are another 24 states that have some version of a workforce-focused scholarship. So states are increasingly making up resources in terms of funding short-term credential programs.
Do you, thanks for that. So another question that came in, it's similar around, so how can competency-based education approaches be better supported with federal financial aid? Or are there plans to revisit Carnegie units, prevalence and accreditation standards, those types of things?
Yeah, the two things I think are really interesting, and I think I'm going to go back to the Howard County example around registered apprenticeship. There are opportunities within registered apprenticeship programs to promote competency and skill-based education, which doesn't have seat time requirements. So I think that is a unique opportunity where registered apprenticeship can be leveraged really as an accelerated instructional model for learners outside of a seat time type of model. But I do think there is interest in making sure that programs reflect the needs of learners. And federally, I think there's interest in making sure that post-secondary programs reflect the needs of learners and that there is not undue time or financial constraints placed upon students in terms of acquiring that credential or degree.
Thanks. Carrie, do we have time for one more? Okay. So this is similar to sort of professional development. So maybe some of the panelists can answer this. And so if there's any suggestions around enhancing learning paths for interns who might be interested in continuing their education. So I don't know if that's converting an internship into a course or if there's any examples around that.
An interesting question.
So, I think internship is a great way to engage with employers. So oftentimes that's the first time when employers reach out to us, their first question is, I think I want to hire some interns. Well, that's sort of the gateway drug to say, great, meet our students and look at all these ways we can serve you. And then, all the investment they put in with the mentor and all of those other things, they realize that it's a heavy lift if they wanted to make it a meaningful thing. And then if they had a really good experience with the intern and then they leave after a semester or summer, then there's nothing left for the employer to show for it. So that's when I like to sort of introduce the registered apprenticeship model as a long-term investment. It's like an internship, but it's one where you can have a prolonged relationship and you can really encourage students, especially with those from marginalized backgrounds, to take advantage of that. So it's a really good way to go talk to them because employers understand internship.
Right. Lisa, I saw you come off mute.
And I was just going to say a lot of colleges I know require students to do some sort of work-based learning as part of their 4-credit degree program. And so we may already have the structures. It's getting campuses to think beyond kind of the traditional models we've had and how we could leverage that. But yeah, I think it's a great way, and it's also an easier way to accumulate some credits in a chosen area.
Well, and one thing to add quickly is that, I think that we're missing out on some opportunities for this professional development. Lisa mentioned the work that she's doing as we just implemented or launched a bachelor's degree in education and early childhood. Once they get their degree, they get certified, they go out in the classroom, they still need to have continuing education for their, certification. And so we need to think about, and that's one of the things I think for the NCAL project that we did, it's non-credit and credit, right? So it's not a one-way system. It really is bi-directional. And so we really need to think about our health occupations, our nurses, they have continuing education units that they are required to maintain. And so I think that's another area that we really need to spend some more time really investigating on what we can do to increase those opportunities.
And Steve, if I can add one more thing,
Mhm.
as we talk about internship, and the topic today is around non-credit innovation. So how do we encourage internship in a non-credit program, which is much harder because they're not with us as long and their lives are quite complex. So one way we're really utilizing it is structuring it into the curriculum through what we call externship, and our certified logistics program that we have for adults with different needs. That's exactly what we're doing, where 6 weeks of externship is built in, where they're getting that employer experience. It's like an internship, but it's built in so that they can leverage resources to be able to pay for that experience.
That's a really good point. Well, I think we're at time. So again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to our panelists. I know everyone's busy, but we appreciate the information that you've been able to share. And so this has been recorded, so we will be sharing it out with the attendees and to a larger audience. So I just want to say thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day.